Daf Yomi tractate Bava Metzia, Daf 9a, top of the page. Bemida, Zos, Kanu, etc. They have both acquired the animal in that manner. Rabbi Yehuda says, actually, one acquires an animal only through pulling in the case of a camel, or driving in the case of a donkey, as that is the manner in which they are normally directed. In any event, it is taught in the Braita, or one who was pulling and one who was driving, which indicates that pulling and driving are indeed effective modes of acquisition. But sitting in a riding position on an animal is not. The Gemara rejects this inference. The same is true with regard to even sitting in a riding position on an animal. It is an effective mode of acquisition. And the reason that the Braita teaches specifically the modes of pulling and driving is only to exclude the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that one acquires an animal only through pulling in the case of a camel or driving in the case of a donkey. Therefore, the first Tana teaches us that even in the opposite manner, meaning pulling a donkey or driving a camel, one acquires the animal. The Gemara asks, if that is so, then let the first Tana combine the cases and teach them as follows. With regard to two people who were pulling or driving either a camel or a donkey, they each acquired the respective animal. The fact that this wording is not used indicates that the first Tana does not entirely disagree with Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara modifies its response. There is one manner of acquisition by which the first Tana concedes to Rabbi Yehuda that one does not acquire the animal if one employs it, and if it is unclear what manner that is. Some say that by pulling a donkey, one does not acquire it, as donkeys tend to not move at all when being pulled. And some say that by driving a camel, one does not acquire it, as that is not the common way to move it. And according to an alternative version of this discussion, there are those who raise an objection to the opinion that one can acquire an animal by means of sitting on it in a riding position from the latter clause of the statement of the first Tana in the Braisa. They acquire the animal in that manner. The phrase, in that manner, is stated to exclude what? Is it not to exclude one who sits in a riding position on the animal? The Gemara answers no. It is stated to exclude the opposite cases. One who drives a camel or pulls a donkey does not acquire the animal. The Gemara asks, if so, that is identical to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara answers, if so, that is identical to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara answers, there is a practical difference between them with regard to one manner of acquisition in which one does not acquire the animal. Some say that according to the first Tana, by pulling a donkey, one does not acquire it. And some say that by driving a camel, one does not acquire it. Come in here a proof from a Braita that one can acquire an animal by sitting on it in a riding position. If one person is sitting in a riding position on a donkey and one other person is holding the reins, this one, the one sitting on the donkey, acquires a donkey. And that one who is holding the reins acquires the reins, learn from it that one who sits in a riding position on an animal acquires it. The Gemara rejects this. Here too the reference is to one who is not only sitting on the donkey, but who is also driving it with his feet by squeezing or kicking it. The Gemara asks, if so, the one who is sitting should acquire part of the reins too. The fact that he does not acquire the reins indicates that his acquisition of the donkey is imperfect, which would not be the case if he were driving it. The Gemara answers, amend the text and say, this one acquires the donkey and half the reins, and that one acquires half the reins. The Gemara asks, granted the one sitting on the donkey acquires half of the items because a mentally competent person, the one holding the items, has lifted it for him. But in what manner does the one holding the reins acquire half the reins? The other end of the reins is attached to the donkey, and because he does not acquire the donkey, he cannot acquire the reins. The more answers, amend the text and say, this one, the one sitting on the donkey, acquires the donkey and almost the entire reins, and that one who is holding the reins acquires only the part of the reins that is actually held in his hand. Hi Mai, the Gemara asks, what is the basis for this understanding? Even if you say that in the case of one who performs an act of acquisition by lifting a found item on behalf of another, the other person, meaning the latter acquires ownership of the item, that statement applies only in a case where one lifts an item with the intention that another person will acquire it. In the case here, this person who is holding the reins is lifting them with the intention of acquiring them for himself. Since he himself does not acquire them, how can he acquire them for others? Rav Ashi said, amend the Brighton and say, this one who is sitting on the donkey and driving it acquires the donkey and its halter, which is attached to its head. And that one who is holding the reins acquires only the part that is held in his hand. And with regard to the rest, the part of the reins that is neither attached to the donkey's head nor in the person's hand, neither this one nor that one has acquired it. They both didn't acquire it. Rabbi Bahu said, actually, do not amend the Brighton, leave it as it is taught. The one holding the reins acquires them because he can detach them from the donkey and bring them toward himself. Since he is able to pull the reins into his possession, they are considered his, even though he does not lift them. The Gemara comments, and this statement of Rabbi Bahu is an error. If you do not say so, but instead accept Rabbi Bahu's opinion, that would result in an incorrect halakhic ruling in the case of a garment, half of which was lying on the ground, and half of which was lying on a pillar, and one came and lifted half of it that was on the ground off the ground, and another person came and lifted the other half that was off the pillar. In that case, should one also rule that the first one acquires the garment and the latter does not acquire it, since the first one was able to detach it from the pillar and bring the entire garment toward him? This is certainly not the halacha. Rather, clearly, the statement of Rabbi Bahu is an error. In any event, the question of whether one can acquire an animal by sitting on it in a riding position remains unresolved. Tashma, the Gemara suggests, coming here an additional proof from a Braita. Rabbi Eliezer says if one sits on an animal in the field or leads an animal in the city, he acquires it. This proves that one can acquire an animal by sitting on it. The Gemara rejects this proof. Here too, the reference is to the one who leads, that is, drives the animal with his feet. The Gemara asks, if so, that is the same as leading the animal. Why would the Braita mention the same case twice? The The Gemara answers the Braita is discussing two types of leading. The Gemara asks, if that is so, what is the reason that one who sits on an animal in the city does not acquire it? Rav Kahana said, it is because people do not normally ride in the city as it is crowded. Rav Ashi says, Rav Kahana, if that is so, by means of an unusual action, one cannot effect an acquisition. And then one lifted a purse that he had found on Shabbat. Has he also not required it? Since people do not normally lift a purse on Shabbat due to prohibition of set aside of muktzah, that is clearly not the halacha. Rather, how should one rule in that case? What he did, and he acquires the purse. Here too, if one sat on an animal in the city, what he did, and he acquires the animal. Rather, the Braita is not referring to a case of a found animal in which one can acquire it even by sitting on it in the city. In fact, we are dealing with a case of buying and selling an animal, where the seller said to the buyer, "Acquire the animal by way that people normally acquire an animal." Therefore, the buyer cannot acquire it in the city by sitting on it. It's the end of 9a. You made it.